Okay, I'm Andrea Bennett, and I've been in basically the herding breed since I was probably 3 or 4 years old. My grandfather bought me a sheepdog that he had um, sent over from Scotland, I believe, and I remember going to pick him up at the train, and ever since then I've just had herding dogs. Um, Whether they were Australian Shepherds, Corgis, Heelers, Border Collies, the sheepdogs. Um, I've always just had, I've never really even had, I had a Yorkie once, and that was given to my son. But I've always, and I told him, I said, this dog doesn't look like it belongs on the ranch, but we'll see how we can do. You know, I was always worried about her. And then I got into the Australian cattle dogs, probably in the 1980s, I guess.
Wow.
I was looking for a dog, and we went, at the time I lived in Texas, and there was somebody selling them out of the parking lot, and this poor little dog was in this squirrel cage looking up at me, and I chose him, took him home, and he was one of the best dogs ever. And he was a healer, and actually with just in the last probably 4 years have I gotten into the registered Australian cattle dogs, and because I was looking for a good dog and just could not really find one that I liked. So I went on the quest of looking at the registered ones, and probably spent about 3 or 4 years before I found the ones that I wanted. So that's how I kind of got into them. We use them on our ranch, so they have a purpose. Well, actually, no. We had my daughter work at the hospital in Cheyenne, and because my husband always had Australian Shepherds, and then I had the cattle dog. But anyway, his dog was old and finally died, and so for Father's Day, my daughter brings in this really scrawny, skinny Australian cattle dog. And she's like, here's your Father's Day present. They were going to put it down if they didn't find a home for it because it keeps working their horses and stuff. And I said, well, that's kind of what they do. And my daughter's like, well, I know, so I figured you guys could fix her. Well, she ended up, my husband ropes, and she ended up being the best dog, and she would bring the cows, out of the holding pen up the return alley so he could rope, and he never had to get off his horse. So he was kind of sold on her then, She took a little bit of training, but once we got her trained, she was the best dog ever. And after she died, that's when we went looking, and most of the ranchers around us, they kind of have the McNabs or the Kelpies. There's a few that have healers, but theirs just didn't have that look that I wanted. You could tell that they just, not necessarily bad, but they didn't have the breeding behind them that I wanted. They didn't have that look. They didn't have the head, the body. Mm-hmm. They just looked like backyard breeding dogs. And that's, if I'm in a breed, I was wanting to get into the breeding when I found that it was so hard to find what I was looking for. So it took some time. Not that their dogs are bad, it's just not what I was looking for.
Mm-hmm. And what was it about the Australian cattle dog compared to the other breeds that really sold you on them?
I think they are. I mean, they all have their strengths and weaknesses, but I really like the hardiness of the cattle dog. I just think they are tough. I mean, you don't want them to get kicked, but they'll take a kicking and they just get back. They don't quit. Where I've had Aussies and some of the other ones, if they get a kick, they're done. They leave. They don't go back, maybe for a week or two. But all the Australian cattle dogs that I've had, they're very courageous. They're not, and like I said, the ones that I've had, because I've had people say that that's not how theirs was, but mine have never been like neurotic. They've always been very well behaved. Sometimes they want to think for themselves, and not really listen, but if you really get that obedience at the very get-go, you can change their mind and they will listen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I think they just have that drive. They just are hardy. The loyalty, that's what sells them on me. And I've never had a vicious one. Like, I've heard sometimes they can be. I've never, ever had a vicious. But when I look for a dog, I don't care if they have the best pedigree, the best conformation. If they don't have a good temperament, the other stuff for me doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
All of mine are people loving.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they love their people. That doesn't mean that if a stranger comes up, they might not, you know, they'll growl, get their hair up, but they're not going to be vicious,
Mm-hmm.
vicious. They're not going to bite my grandchildren. They're not going to be just where people, they might be afraid to get out of their vehicle, and dogs are a very good judge of character, and I think any one of my dogs would bite somebody if they felt that threat. But they're just good-tempered, good-minded. They listen. They're not out, you know, killing livestock. They're not out killing my cats, chickens, whatever. They're trustworthy pretty much with anything and everybody.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do think that you have to train them at a very young age to accept cats, to accept chickens. You know, I think a lot of that is training as well. But they got to have the temperament to be trained. They're very independent thinkers. They want to do things the way they want to do them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, you know, when we're out working, I let them do the things they want to. And sometimes, you know, it's kind of like little kids. They have to put their finger somewhere where they're not supposed to and get a mash.
Right.
And they figure it out quickly, you know, hey, maybe they were telling me not to do that for a good reason. Mm-hmm. And what I have found is it don't take long for them to learn a lesson. The history that I know of, you know, you read some different things, but, you know, they were originated in Australia. And they used the dingo, blue merle, smooth-coated collie. I think that Dalmatian was in there, the Kelpie. And anyway, they were originally to drive cattle across, you know, the rugged land of Australia. So both in enclosed areas and in the open. So I guess, you know, when they didn't have a whole lot of help to move these cows, the next best thing was these dogs. And so that's how they originated. And I think it was in like the 1897 was when the first standard of the breed was recognized. And they were, in 1903 was the original kennel club in which they moved to.
Mm-hmm.
That AKC standards, they want them to be around the dogs 18 to 20 inches, you know, approximately. Mm-hmm. The females 17 to 19 inches. They want them to have a straight top line, sloping shoulders. Their tails cannot be curled up around their backs. See what else? Their head needs to be broad, curved between the ears. You don't want teeny tiny ears, nor do you want fat ears, more like a medium ear set. Mm-hmm. Strong in the loin, muscular neck, medium. Their bite needs to be a scissor bite with good strong teeth. Their eyes are supposed to be oval and dark brown. Their shoulders, I think, is where they're lacking right now, is what they're fighting, is a nice forearm that it's become short. Okay. And so they're trying to get that lengthened out. One of the things that's lacking, that, and I don't even know how that, I guess, just evolves over time, you know. Okay, shoulders, you know, strong, sloping, muscular, broad. The croup is rather long and sloping. Their feet are supposed to be like cat-like, and they want the tail set to be moderately low. They don't want the tail docked. I don't, you see that sometimes. And the non-registered cattle dogs, that they dock the tail, that's, a big fault in the AKC, which they need their tail as a rudder. It helps them with balance. The coat is smooth. They have red or blue with some tan points or the black masks on the blue dogs. There's not supposed to be, which you see them now, people advertising chocolates or lavenders or minis.
Right.
And all those three things really are not recognized. It's more of a fault, actually.
Right.
If it's a mini, it's just because it's too little, but there's not necessarily a breed or, of minis. And when people call me and want a mini, I'm like, no, and I will never have those because that's not within the breed standard. And my goal is to improve, not to take away. And I think if you breed minis, you're going to be taking away from the function of the dog. And I always tell them that's just my opinion. I'm sure you can find them, but they won't never be here.
Right. In other breeds, you'll get breeders and handlers that will swear there's a difference. But is there a difference between the reds and the blues as far as their temperaments are concerned, or?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Other than color, I don't see any difference. I mean, if they're all given training on equals, obedience, and all that, they're the same. Their temperament. You hear that red's a more savage biter or blues are a more savage, but I think they're equal. It's individually dog-based, not color.
Is it a fault to breed a blue to a red?
No.
No. Okay.
No. You can breed a blue to a red, and you'll get a red, reds and blues in your litter. I have one blue dog bitch that I've been breeding, and she's never had a red, even though one of her parents was red, she's never had a red pup.
Okay.
So what I want, number one, temperament. I want a good temperament with natural herding instinct. A lot of times, like I took a pup out there and you could tell she had that natural instinct. She knew where I wanted. I mean, it's so weird. It's like they know what you're trying to do. And they go in there naturally and want to work this cow. And so, that's what I like to see. I like to see that natural instinct in which we can build on. Because if they are not naturally want to work cows, I don't think anything you can do will make them want to. They have to naturally have that instinct. Now you can build upon that and make it better, where they know what you're wanting to do and guide them to where you're wanting to put those cows. But if they don't have that natural instinct, it sure is hard to instill that. So that's my goal, and to have good conformation, a good head, a nice bite, a long sweeping gait that helps them work tirelessly. They don't get tired working because their body is made to work. So you don't want something that is too big and too non-athletic. I like a medium dog, medium build, that's athletic. That after they herd, you can throw the frisbee. They can go do dock diving. They could do obedience. The well-rounded dog is what I like.
And do you partake in any activities besides?
We just herd.
We
just herd at home. We do play frisbee with them because of where we live. Makes it very difficult to do other things, because anything that, like, I would love to do dock diving, and I know my dogs would just love it and would really exceed at it, or even like the fast cat stuff. But we live so far out, and then COVID hit, right when we were going to go to Cheyenne and do some things, and then everything is shut down.
Yeah.
So basically all we've been able to do. My grandson, when we have puppies, he sets up an obstacle course. He takes them through the tunnels and over the teeter-totters and through everything. And they're just brave puppies, and nothing really, scares them or deters them. They are just, and when they leave here, we have gotten such good feedback about that. They're socialized to kids, they're socialized to cats, they're socialized to chickens, to cows, pretty much anything, horses, and they've really excelled in everything that they've done. We have some people are going to be doing the dock diving and obedience trials and the different things because they live in a populated area where they don't have to drive 150 miles one way just to do something,
Yeah, right.
Location is a big deterrent here for us to do some of those things, but it doesn't take away from the ability of the dogs, I assure them. I do know of a couple of service dogs that they are using the cattle dogs for. I sold one that went to a police officer that they were going to use for a police dog. I know that they're able to do lots of different things, and it's just finding that person that wants to take them down that road. So they're able to work sheep. A cattle dog's bite is sometimes pretty strong though, and so you just have to match one of those that maybe isn't quite as strong biter on sheep or ducks. But it is possible. I mean, but they're also, you have some of them those guys that are working them bulls, them bulls are mean and tough, and, some of them other dogs, they don't have the courage to go in there and work those kind, where those Australian cattle dogs, they don't back down. And so it's just to find the right dog for the right person, you know what I mean, for the right job. I mean, and sometimes you can tell that when they're here as puppies, and I try to match them up. I had just placed one in a home where the guy works at a sale barn, and he needed something that had a lot of grit, and so I could tell which puppy I would, if it was me, that I would choose, and that's the one he chose. And just last week, he's like, man, I can see why you need this insurance. He doesn't back down from nothing. Nothing. And I said, yeah, that's how he was, as soon as he saw it, his eyes were open. He was the first one out of the whelping box. He was the first one, to guard the food. That was his, and he was the first one biting their little legs, his litter mates, and, his mother would be walking, and he'd grab her leg. And I said he was the one that was just very, very outgoing and kind of rough. So that's where he needed to go. He wasn't need to go to, the local daycare where those little kids were going to get hurted all day.
Right.
So interview them and find out what are they looking for. I mean, if they're wanting some lap dog, not that they can't be, this is probably not the breed for you right now, because they do require a lot of exercise, not just physical, but mental exercise for them to really excel. They need something to do, whether it's frisbee or jogging or, pulling a cart, whatever. They need something to do.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that dog that my husband got from my daughter that was chasing everything and they were going to put down, when he'd, try to work his cows or whatever, she would get loose, and so he tied her to a truck tire while he was working him. Well, the next thing you know, here comes the truck tire out in the arena with her. It's like she got stronger and stronger. So then he put the cinder block in the truck tire, and then here comes the cinder block and the truck tire. And before you know it, this little skinny dog turned into this look like weightlifting dog, just this strong dog. And I mean, she was they had bought her out of a pet store, actually. She had a dog tail, and, they had spayed her, and which my husband, he was like, man, I wish I could have got a pup out of her, because she was just awesome. Right. When he'd sent her in there, I mean, if she had to, she'd jump up on the backs of those roping steers, get down in there where one wasn't going, and she'd get them moving. I seen her hang on to their tail, and they were running, and her feet weren't even on the ground, but she was not letting go.
Wow.
that's when my husband was sold on him. He was like, oh my gosh. And when she died, and this friend of ours got this big canvas made of her because she knew we just loved that dog.
Oh, that's awesome.
My husband's like, you're not putting that up right now. You can't put that up. Then when I told him I was going to try to find another one, he was like, yeah. So it took a while, you know, and then when I brought that pup home and that I found and brought him home, and, you know, within a week, this little 8-week-old puppy knew sit, stay, lay down, crawl, back up, you know, and he's like, now what are you going to teach him? Like, I don't know, we'll have to figure something else out, but just the intelligence, and, you know, they want to be with you, and just great. For me, they're just great dogs. Mm-hmm. The last litter, it was almost like instantaneous. I mean, my grandson named her Ears Up, and her ears were the first one up. Mm-hmm. But she just was so intent on looking at you and following your moves, and never faltered. No matter what the rest of the litter was, she was always there looking at you, for you, to have her do something. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, she is turning out to be she's about 8-9 months old now, and she is really turning out to be a very exceptional dog. And told my grandson, because he had picked her out too, you know, he was only 5, and I said, you know, Cameron, that's the same one I got. And I mean, I have to tell you, the first litter that we had out of him, he just loves them. He calls them his little crocodiles. And we were out there playing with them, and he goes, Grandma, I'm going to have a sleepover with them. I said, huh? He goes, yeah, I'm going to go get my sleeping bag, and I'm going to sleep out here with them. And I said, well, I thought you were afraid of the dark. And he said, not with them, I'm not. I said, well, yeah, I guess you got a point there. But he absolutely loves them. And he spends, I mean, you have to make him come in, you know. Mm-hmm. No, you got to come in. They're okay outside, you know, because they do live outside, and they have heated dog houses, or if it's real cold, they're in the garage in a heated kennels in there, but they're made to be outside. Mm-hmm. And I do have one that comes inside, and I tried to keep the other one, but they just hate it. They don't want to be inside. They don't like it. It's like they're claustrophobic, you know. They don't. But my male, he doesn't want to be outside. He wants to come in at night, and so he comes in at night, stays in the house with us. And the other ones, you try to get in, they're like, no, they're just like almost like this, you know, pacing and whining at the door. And I'm like, you know, it's 40 below outside. You need to stay in. So anyway, we have a great big kennel set up in our garage that's heated, because we do get cold.
Oh, I'm sure.
And so, you know, I'll put them in there, and they're a little bit better in there, but they just do not like it in the house at all. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest health concern, from what I have read and dealt with, luckily mine have been all tested, you know, good for this stuff, but I had a lady come and get a puppy for me who her dog went blind from, I think it was PRA her dog had. And I think the PRA and the PRA RCD4 and the PLL, those are all the genetic eye diseases that they can get. I think that's the biggest thing that I see that dogs test, either as a carrier or they have that, is the biggest thing. They're also susceptible, you know, to hip dysplasia, the elbow dysplasia, those types of things as well. But I think, and of course, the deafness. All my puppies go and get their hearing tested at a Bear, you know, testing facility where they test their hearing before they go home. Because even though the sire and the bitch tested good, that doesn't mean that somewhere down the line you could have a deaf puppy. So that way I test all my puppies before they leave, and so far so good. We haven't had any deaf ones. They've all been good, which is a good thing. But I was really worried when I took my male dog for his hips, you know, they would be bad just because he does not protect himself at all. He will jump 6-foot fences. He will crawl over 6-foot fences. One day his Frisbee landed on the garage roof and there was a panel up against it. He tried to crawl the panel and get up on the roof to get his Frisbee. He's crawled trees before. I have a video where he crawled the tree, and he'll jump up flat-footed. You know, when I have a round bale of hay on the tractor, he'll jump up on that bale of hay and ride it out to the pasture. And he does not take care of himself. I do have him on joint supplements because of that, because I worried about it. And, you know, just I think environmental has as much to do with hips as does genetics. And I think, so I was more worried about the environmental aspect of it, not the genetics. But he came back good and, you know, is a negative on every single one of his tests that we've done. And my female, she was a carrier of the PRA. So, and, you know, they said when I was speaking with my vet and a bunch of the geneticists, they're like, don't, because she has everything else you want, temperament. She's, you know, built strong and just a really nice dog. Don't discard her from your genetic breeding, because the breeding pool is so small already that they don't recommend doing that if they have everything. He says that's the whole reason why you test, so that you don't breed somebody that maybe has it, or a carrier to a carrier. In this particular case, you have to have two of the genes, you know, or two copies to actually have the disease. So it's really nothing to worry about. So I'm like, okay. So we did breed her in. I haven't really had any problems. And if somebody wants a breeding puppy, I'll go ahead and test the puppies before they get one. That way they know if they had their male dog was a carrier, so they for sure didn't want a carrier. And so we just went ahead and tested all the females, so to know that the female that she chose, which was clear of everything, so it worked out. So I think you just have to be informed.
Right. Definitely.
And they really don't have a lot compared to a lot of other breeds. They're pretty healthy. And other than the eyes and the hearing, I think is the two main things that are really need to be checked. It's my job to teach them that that's not acceptable behavior, even though that's their nature. And I've let my peacocks out. They don't bother them. They don't bother my chickens. You know, they just don't. The biggest thing they do sometimes when we're working horses in the round pen, they'll chase on the outside of the round pen, so we'll have to get them and tie them up. And, you know, no, you can't try to heal our horse or chase our horse. So it's just training, obedience training. And a lot of times, like my husband, and I'll tell him, you know, watch that dog when you go catch those horses and lead them up. If you pay attention and you tell him no, he'll go lay down, just like the female. They'll go lay down. But they're always watching. But it's my job to catch them before they do something wrong to correct it. Because after they do something wrong, it's usually too late. But if you can catch them before they do it, you know, then they learn a whole lot better that way. And you're not getting mad at them because you caught them before they did something wrong. I think the cattle dogs are a lot tougher. Their bite is a lot more aggressive. If you wanted something to be quiet and sneak up, I think the Border Collie would be better because they're just, you know, I'm not saying they can't. They're not as like, they don't get on their bellies as much and crawl. They more like stand up and creep. And they're way, I think, more aggressive. Way more aggressive. I think your cattle dogs are really good, like alley dogs. And they're not so much, you know, they don't go to the head so much because they're healers, but so they're more drivers. And like, I'm not saying my dog has not been able to send them in front of the cows and bring them back around the other way instead of getting behind them. That's just training. But I think naturally they would rather be behind them and push them than at the head. And the Border Collies is a little more quieter. as they go in and push, is where I feel that the Border Collie is.
Mm-hmm.
They're a little softer too. Like, you cannot yell at the Border Collie. You will hurt their feelings. And
Mm-hmm.
they're more mentally soft than the healers are.
Mm-hmm.
They shed about twice a year, and they shed pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
I give mine the salmon oil, and it does seem, and if you brush them out, it does seem to help, but they do shed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed any skin issues or anything like that?
No.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing I like about them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I haven't had any allergy issues, no eye issues, no itchy issues,
Mm-hmm.
no, just nothing. I don't even have, of course, and I don't know what it is, but I have never had fleas here. I've never had ticks here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always a good thing.
Right. Hey, can you talk a little bit about your diet? What do you like to feed your cattle dog, and what do they do best on?
I used to feed, and I don't know if you can say, but I used to feed 100% Purina Pro Plan.
Mm-hmm.
And did good. I had a friend of mine give me some of the Sport Mix, which they just had a recall.
Mm-hmm.
They had won it at a herding trial. They gave me some of that to try. My dogs did great on that as well. And then I went to pottery. I don't know if you've ever heard of pottery. But a friend of mine, she's a groomer in North Dakota. She's like, you really should try this. This is great food, veterinarian approved, developed, all this. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm doing good with Purina. I haven't had any problems. And she's like, well, just try it. So she sent me this stuff to try. So I tried it. Well, I really do like it. They have quite a few different formulas that you can get. Mm-hmm. And basically it's like a, what do you call it? Direct marketing type company. Mm-hmm. And I'm really not into those for much. That's why I was like, no, I won't try it. Well, anyway, I did try it. My dogs did great on this food. I mean, Zip, when I put his joint medication in, he would never eat it, so I'd always have to boil liver and then grind it up, mix it up so he would eat it. And this, I don't. I just mix it in there, put a little bit of their salmon oil on there, and they have this stuff. It's like spices, like it would be for pickle, but it's their topping mixes, and they have different ones. And he really likes the duck topping mix, and so I just sprinkle a little bit of that duck stuff on his feed. I mean, he doesn't leave one kibble left. He eats it all. Mm-hmm. And he is a really finicky eater. He doesn't eat table scraps. Like, you could have given him a steak and he wasn't going to eat it. He just is kind of a finicky eater, and, but he loves that, and he cleans it all up, even with his joint medication in it. So I've went to feeding that, and they're doing great. You feed less, they poop less, they're full, their hair looks good, they don't seem to shed as much. So haven't had any trouble with it, so I figured, well, I'll just stay with this for a while until I do, because they're doing great on it. Mm-hmm. And when you order it, like if you order the extra large part that they have, I was kind of shocked at first because, it's like 32 pounds or 33 pounds. Well, they send it in 10-pound plus bags, 3 of them. And I'm like, at first, I'm like, what the heck? And then I got to be able to just carry those little 10-pound bags. It was kind of nice instead of carrying around a 50-pound bag.
Right.
They have a bunch of different, like, Gastro Plus, you sprinkle some of that on their food if they're having some tummy problems. Mm-hmm. And anytime I send my puppies home, I usually give them 5 of those, and you just sprinkle half of it on their feed. And I don't care how good they are. Going to new homes and leaving your litter mates is kind of stressful. Yeah. So they can get some little tummy issues, and this just kind of helps them get over that tummy stuff, you know, and just sprinkle a little bit on their food, and they do great. And they had some, Pottery had some, over Christmas type thing, they had some educational programs, and they had all these different vets come on, and it was an all-day thing, and it was talking about different things within the industry, dogs and stuff. And they had all these top-notch vets talking about all these problems, and it was really an informative thing. I mean, really informative.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really enjoyed that part too, that they give back and have a lot of educational type programs that you can learn from.
Mm-hmm.
Like the no grain stuff and all that. They had vets talking about that and how that affected them. And it was just it's nice learning experience with them. So
yeah, definitely.
First thing we do is water and feed them in the mornings, and then we get them out, and depending on the day, you know, who gets to go. And if my husband ropes, you know, he'll use usually you use your older dog and he'll teach your pups, you know, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandson comes home, he does obedience, and he loves doing the obstacle course. He's always trying to figure out something else new for him to do. Jump on this barrel and walk across the plank. He's always doing stuff with them. But a lot of times they just, you know, help do chores and ride on the Ranger with us to check and do chores. When we feed horses, we feed off a big trailer. We have lots and lots of horses. And so, you know, Zip, he'll either ride on the round bale out there, and a couple of the females, they'll ride on the trailer. And basically they keep the horses from jumping up on the trailer. You know, they know, hey, don't come over here. He'll bite my nose. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So they get to do all kinds of stuff. We try to make sure their exercise. A lot of times, you know, when we go on the Ranger, they just run with us and to get their exercise. The biggest thing is you got to keep them exercised and busy.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's frisbee or, you know, the flirt pole or what balls. I mean, they really like doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and I probably said that. You know, I've lived on a ranch my whole life, so I see these people, and I'm not saying what they're doing is wrong, but that they take weeks off of work to stay with these females, and they sleep in there with them and all this, and I'm like, you know, even on horses or whatever, if my horse, my mare, is not a good mama, I'm going to get rid of her, because that's going to transfer down to her foals. Well, I feel like that's with my dogs. I mean, I'm there when she whelps, but I don't have to stay in there the whole time. I mean, she's a good mama. She's going to take care of her puppies, and she's going to make sure she doesn't lay on them usually. I have hog rails, and I have the whelping box and the heat and all that, and I check on them. You know, I have cameras so I can watch them, but I've never had any problems with these mamas. They just want to be mamas. They're good mamas, and if they're not, I'm not going to breed them again. And they probably learned to be good mamas from their mama. You know, like I said, I've had a mare, a couple of them, that were terrible mothers, terrible. Like one had her foal and took off and just left it out there.
Wow.
And we had to go find it. Well, she was a lease mare, and the guy that we got, he said, oh, yeah, she always does that. And I'm like, well, I don't want her next year. She always does that, because that's not a normal thing. You know, I have another mare out there. When she has a baby, you better stay away, because she's going to either bite you or kick you for the first 3 days. And then after that, she's fine. It's just her mother instincts is, I'm protecting this baby, you know, and I would rather have one like that than one that just leaves it and could care less where it's at or if it's alive or dead. Well, you know, it's really hard, I think, to find good information on this breed. I've asked, do you guys have a magazine that goes out with your stud dogs in it? Or, you know, they have a little bit, but I think also COVID has had a big impact. And I think they have good dogs. You know, I've seen some good dogs in Brazil. I've seen some good dogs, obviously, in Australia, Poland. I've seen some in Russia. So I think they're pretty well out there. Turkey had some that I've seen that were nice. And there's nice dogs in the United States, too. Just, you know, it's trying to get the information has been rather difficult, of where the breeders are, and how to find the good dogs, how to get into the good dogs, how to even know, because there's a lot of bad as well as good, but usually you can find the bad easier sometimes, it seems like, than the good.
Mm-hmm. Are you involved with the breed club?
I just joined one of them, but I've heard absolutely nothing from them.
Wow.
Nothing. And I was last year, and I thought, well, maybe we'll get a publication, a newsletter, something. Nothing. Not a thing. Other than the codes for your discounts. That's all I've gotten.
Oh.
So I was a little disappointed in that.
Right.
And I don't, like I said, I don't know if COVID doesn't have a big part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just assuming that's probably what it is. And then the other one, I think it was Australian Cattle Dogs United or something, is the one I've heard nothing. The other one I was going to join, and one of the ladies that was a judge or something told me that it was very political and they only let you join if they, just very political.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't even tried to join that one yet. So, but I do plan on it, because I think all the information you can get and be a part of that is betterment for my breeding program.
Mm-hmm.
Have you researched this breed?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been around an Australian cattle dog?
Mm-hmm.
Are you prepared for the bites on your heels? Are you prepared for the bites on your feet? Do you know how to teach them not to bite you? Basically, it's just redirection. You want to redirect them to, a toy.
Mm-hmm.
The flirt pole is what we did, or the broom. They learned they could play the broom when we did, and then they did that, not the kids. So we didn't, I think you really have to educate yourself on this breed.
Mm-hmm.
Their exercise requirements, their mental requirements.
Mm-hmm.
They're technically not an apartment dog. That being said, I do know people that do have them in apartments and they do fine.
Mm-hmm.
But you just really have to research this breed. Do you have little kids? Are you aware that they're going to bite at your children? That doesn't mean they're being bad. It's just their nature. That's their breeding. Mm-hmm. And so I always try to find out, how many kids they have. Have they researched it? Have they been around them? Are you aware of what their temperaments can be like? So those are the red flags. If they tell me no, they've never had one, they just seen it on TV, or they watched the Bluey commercial or cartoon, I'm like, you really need to get with somebody who has these and spend some time with them and see what these dogs are about. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, you see them, I see them all the time, and I just can't believe it, because I just think they're the most best dogs ever,
Mm-hmm.
that are in shelters or rescues, and I'm like, what? Why? Well, this dog did this and this and this. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's, your responsibility to teach them not to do those things,
Mm-hmm.
So that's the big thing, and I always tell them, I'm always here to help you. And if I don't know the answer, we can try to find out who does, because I think that's the biggest thing, knowing where to find your resources to help if you have trouble. Usually if they're not having trouble, you don't hear from people. Mm-hmm. It's just when there is a problem, do you hear from them?
Right.
I do hear from my people all the time about how much they love them, though, and I just love it when they send me pictures and, how good their dogs are.
That's awesome.
We try to do some of the puppy culture with them when they're born, and I do think that helps tremendously. Mm-hmm. When we take them to the vet and they do their bear hair test, she always says how wonderful they are and how great they are. And she, typically wasn't a cattle dog lover, but mm-hmm. she just loves how well behaved mine were. And we took them to get their hips x-rayed stuff, how they never growled at her. They just, they were a little scared at what they were doing because they had no idea, but that they were very cooperative and just good behaved. So those are things I like to hear. But like I said, I think most of it's my job to teach them. And so owners, I want them to be aware that biggest thing they can do for their puppy, obedience training as soon as they get home.
Mm-hmm.
Start obedience training because you're going to need it.
But how important is health testing for
Very
you?
important,
Mm-hmm.
especially. I mean, even if you're not going to breed them, if you buy from a breeder, ask for health testing. You don't want to get a dog home and in 2 years they're blind.
Mm-hmm.
Or if that's your choice, if it's going to be your choice, it's okay with you. At least you know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
I don't bring my dogs without health testing because a lot of time, money, heart goes into these dogs.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to spend all this time and heart within 2 years and the dog that you knew what you wanted to do is blind,
mm-hmm.
or they're deaf, or they're having seizures, or they have urinary problems, or muscle problems, or whatever. You want to know that that doesn't mean that something won't never happen. It just knows
mm-hmm.
that genetically they're clear.
Right.